What's up? What's up? Thanks for joining. Welcome to another edition of Coding Stuff in React. This is Starboi Part 2. And put the Starboi app on screen. So if you were here with me last time, this is the really bare bones basic application that we made. And it was going to be like small scope, and it was going to be basically done. There's one feature that I want to add. And we'll add that today. It'll be pretty quick. But I decided that I want to increase the scope. And the reason that I want to increase the scope is because I have a TikTok following. And when I tell these people how to code, I'm telling them when they learn React, they also need to know how to use Redux. They need to know how to use Redux with hooks. Right? And I think this is all true, that if you're going to become a React developer and a web developer these days, and you're going to get a job, it's actually not essential that you know Redux. The reason that I push it so hard is because it's a really powerful differentiator. And it's the return on investment to learning Redux is really big. I actually could pick on Redux quite a bit. As Dan Abramov said, you don't always need it. In this app in front of us, we definitely don't need it. So I am, in some sense, contriving additional scope just so that I can demonstrate how to use Redux. But I still think it's good for me to do that so that I can point people to a reference project that I maintain. Today I can point them to projects that other people maintain, but I'm less familiar with those. So I want to be able to point them to a project that I maintain. And I can be more responsive with any concerns they might have. So what are we doing to the scope here? So let me give you an outline of today's agenda. The first thing we're going to do is that we're going to tackle together an authentication issue from a Git point of view. It has nothing to do with the web app. On the last stream, I tried to push here, I push right here, support for password authentication was removed. And I said, I thought I already handled this. And we'll dive into the details in a minute, but basically because I'm on Windows, WinCred wiped out my token. So I think I know how to fix that, but we're gonna actually work through that live. So you're gonna get to see part of being a developer, which is not writing code, right? There's so much more to being a developer than just writing code. One of those things is maintaining your, what we call physical environment, which funny enough, it doesn't actually mean physical environment. It means like your computer, as opposed to the software that you're working on. So like your memory, like your actual RAM would be part of your physical environment. And so that layer sits outside of the software. You need to take care of that first. Before you can get developing, you need to install VS Code, right? You need to have your outer environment working before you can actually even get to the code. So this is going to be one of those things is, oh no, my Git's not working. This is like something you would actually run into as a developer in a corporate setting. So we're going to work through that. Okay. Although hopefully you'd be using Mac in your corporate setting. But hey, I know quite a few developers that have to use Windows. More so at no-name companies. Okay. We're going to do the authentication thing, which is a Git authentication thing. Then to this application, we're going to add one feature. And it's a pretty straightforward feature. It's a JSON file import export. So today, we're importing this, right? But we're importing it from a fixed path. It's this anecdotes.json file. Just to remind you, this page anecdotes component is importing the JSON file directly. We're going to leave that. It's not like we're removing that. But what we're going to do is add a button. And I think maybe right under the learn star method, maybe the button will go right here. It's kind of a design decision that we can kind of think through. But I think right here it'll be fine. And there will be an import file and an export file button. So that we still load this one by default. But I could choose to load a different one. And then the idea being that I can also edit. Maybe I will make this editable, or maybe that's out of scope. I think I need to make it editable. Let me jot that down. Make anecdote content editable. And we might use a hack like HTML editable div attribute. So this would be cool. You might be able to content editable attribute. You might be able to learn about an interesting feature here that it's like a browser feature that a lot of people wouldn't know about. Even in a traditional development setting, you won't know about this. Here, let me just jot them down. Content editable and design mode. So the traditional way that you would make everything editable is they would all be forms, right? Like this would be a text area. I don't want to go through and convert everything into forms. So kind of a hack that I can do is I can say content editable equals true. Now I can type in there. Isn't that crazy? A lot of people don't know about this. Hi, I'm Bob. I still can't go over here because I didn't touch those, right? Let me take this content editable up a level and go to the whole card maybe. Let's go to the whole card maybe. Content editable true. And now I can do all that. Chipmunk, unable to check chipmunk. So there might be an issue putting it on the div level. And then, but I've put it on this div, but I still can't edit this card over here. So one thing I can do, I'll refresh this page, and I'll turn the document design mode on, which effectively makes, is true not the right value? Oh, it might be on. Okay, on, yeah. Which effectively makes everything content editable. That's what design mode does. So I can even edit this thing up here. What's up? So that's called design mode. And you can do this, it doesn't need to be your own project. I can go to google.com and enable design mode. If you are a designer, if you're not even a coder, design mode is still useful. That's an image, so there's not text there, but there's text here. So there's Gmail and images. I'm going to change this to hood mail. Right? So I don't have Gmail, I have hood mail. And then you refresh and it's all wiped out. So you're not actually communicating with their server. This is just something happening on your own browser, and that's why it's safe and secure. It's a cool feature. So I think that we're going to do that as kind of a quick hack, and then over in the Rockstarboi, which is named because a lot of these employers and hiring companies, they're like, we want a rock star, right? So we're gonna make a Rockstarboi, and it's still going to be a star anecdote organizer, but it's going to have a larger scope. So that's why it's Rockstarboi instead of just Starboi. So for that one, we'll go through and do like proper forms. There's like a use form hook. React form, use form, React hook form. Yeah, so I'll probably use this guy. This is a great library. I'll leave that up so I don't forget about it. So anyway, back to the agenda. We're going to do the WinCred thing. We're going to do JSON file import export. We'll throw some content editable attributes in there to make the export actually useful. Because otherwise the import would make sense, but the export wouldn't really make sense because nothing's editable. So we'll make that editable. Then we're going to select an auth provider. So for Rockstarboi has this greater scope. One of the things is that it's going to have an auth provider. And we can step through that decision criteria real quick right now. So if you go watch the first video, I decide to use GitHub Pages for Starboi because basically it doesn't have a backend. So for Rockstarboi, we do need a backend because we need authentication, which means we need a server. You might have heard this term serverless. John, what about serverless? Can't I have serverless authentication? Yes, you can, and you still need a server. Serverless does not mean there is no server layer. Serverless means you might not have to manage the servers. And so it's like it's not a traditional server, or it's not your server. So in that sense, it's serverless. But if there is any behind the scenes stuff going on, if there's any database connection, you're going to need, someone is going to have a server and provide a server connection, because your client cannot directly talk to a database. So that being said, I actually do want to go serverless, but I still need a server. Usually we'll use a term, instead of saying server, we'll say something like serverless functions, but don't be confused. There is still a server involved. I just don't have to maintain it. I write a function, I put it somewhere, and their server will run that function. But they still have a server. I just don't have the server. Okay, let me know if you want me to do a deep dive one day on serverless technology. I'm a big fan of serverless. Oh, and let me check my chat messages just to make sure. Hi. So I am on Twitch right now, YouTube, Live, Periscope. I think I should be on LinkedIn, but LinkedIn doesn't have a chat. That's right. Yeah. And I encourage you to follow me on TikTok. I'm trying to get to 1,000 followers, and then I could be live on TikTok as well. Currently, I'm in the 300s, I think. Yeah. Upper 300s. Cool. So let's step through our provider decision making real quick. So in the past video, I decided to use GitHub Pages, and you can go rewatch that and see the thought process. But before I decided on GitHub Pages, I had narrowed it down to Next.js, a static site with serverless, which would use Vercel, or Create React App, which I can do on GitHub Pages. And the difference there was that Next.js was just a little more that I didn't need, okay? Because I didn't need a server. I didn't need serverless functions. I didn't need authentication. Didn't need SEO, didn't need. So why have that complexity? Let's just go with Create React App, which is officially supported by the React core team. It's like the starter they recommend if you are just learning React and you're like just making your first toy application. Everyone says, go use Create React App. It's kind of controversial to use that in production, but for your portfolio, it's great. So Starboi used Create React App. Now, that's no longer good enough. I need a server. Yes, true, serverless functions, but I still need that authentication layer and the capability to handle serverless functions. You can do all that with Create React App, but it's sort of like you have to work it in. It doesn't come for free. What would be better is if I have a different starter where that stuff basically comes for free. And in addition, if I'm on GitHub Pages, I can't make those database calls because I don't have a build process that can manage what are called secrets. So let me know if this is confusing to you, but basically, like a password to a database should be a secret. I shouldn't just put that in my GitHub for all to see. So that is one of the reasons that I would prefer Vercel. It has a great secrets manager. So I need authentication. I want serverless functions. I want secret management. And in this case, I do want to deploy it to a place where a bunch of different people can use it. So that would be true for GitHub Pages too, but a bunch of people are not going to be able to log in to GitHub Pages. So that's the constraint there. So now we back into our two where we cut out Next.js, and instead we're going to take those two and cut out Create React App, leaving us with Next.js. Next.js, from Next.js, I want to use Vercel. Vercel is a great deployment platform. The first video has some of the reasons that I like Vercel. Let me know if you want to know more reasons, but basically, I'll just keep it short here and say that if you're going to use Next.js, probably your default choice, a great default choice, is Vercel. Those organizations are highly related. It might be the case that Vercel just flat out runs Next.js. Let's double check. Yeah, Next.js Vercel. So with Create React App, what we said is the core technology we want is React. What starter do they recommend? Create React App. Now we're changing the game and saying the core technology that I want is Next.js for static site generation, authentication layers, serverless functions, all those reasons. So what organization, or like, does Next.js recommend a specific starter or a specific deployment platform? Yes, they do. They recommend Vercel. So that's how we get to Vercel. And now the question becomes, what about my authentication layer? And so that's how we arrive at the page in front of us, Vercel.com docs. What are their recommended authentication providers? You can roll your own authentication if you want, and that's a bad idea. It takes a lot of time and effort. If you're like a super wealthy organization, like, you know, a bank, or not even a bank, like just like a large organization, you might want to roll your own authentication, but even then, probably not. These providers make it so quick and easy that there's a really high scale requirement before it becomes a smart decision to make your own authentication system. It does exist though. Like, it's very common for tier 1 companies to like not use any of these. But for like a solo developer, it's like a no-brainer basically to use a third-party provider. So we decided we're not going to roll our own. We're going to use somebody else's. What is the list of options and how do we pick one? The list of options is bigger than this, but because we know that we want Vercel and we know that we want Next, so we're going to start by asking, hey, Vercel, what do you recommend for an auth provider? And then the question is like, are any of these acceptable? If none of these are acceptable, we can look elsewhere. But the short answer is that a bunch of these are really great. There's one that is not on here that I like called Supabase. I've been doing a series called Moonlogs, so you can go check that out where I work with Supabase quite a bit. I like them, but I don't like them so much that I'm just going to jump for them. There are issues with Supabase. And one of them is that the user's email who's logging in is not always is not effectively encrypted, basically. And they're aware of that issue and they claim to be working on it. I don't know with what degree of haste, but anyway, they're working on it. Supabase is supposed to be like an open source Firebase. So Firebase is like this like great Google product, right? I've actually had a bad time with Firebase. I think it's just a poor match if you're not in the Google ecosystem. It's kind of meant to go, you know, this is my opinion here. This is not like objective fact, but in my experience, if you're not using Google Cloud, like if you're using Google Cloud, it's really smart to use Firebase. If you're not using Google Cloud, it's kind of like a square peg in a round hole. And same with AWS Cognito. Two things to think about with AWS Cognito. First of all, similar to Firebase, it is a platform match, in this case for Amazon Web Services. I've used it. It was really great. But if you're not using AWS, which I'm not, square peg round hole. The other thing here is that every time I've used AWS Cognito, I've never been able to use it standalone. I've always had to join session with my application session, so that AWS Cognito handles the literal authentication, but they would hold essentially none of my application data. Maybe the role information. With my team of developers project I was working on, even that was controversial. Like even putting the roles in Cognito was controversial because our LDAP was outside of that system. And so we just kept the role information in our own sphere in-house, not within Cognito. And so literally all Cognito did was hold like email address and password. Like that's it. And then we would get the Cognito session, JWT, and we would put that as a child to our own application session. And I'm comfortable with that pattern. I have no issue with that pattern. And it very well might be the case that any of these providers I have to do that. But if I could get a provider where I just have the one session, that would be a little bit nicer. Okta, I've had a tough time with. I think it's rather old. Userbase I've never heard of. It seems new, but my intuition is this is like another Supabase, Firebase type of thing. I looked over here. There's some red flags. The current build is breaking. If I look at the deployed demo is broken. So these are all red flags. So this is going to be a no-go. Let me know if you want me to try using Userbase sometime. I'll give it a shot. Because according to their documentation, they say they're end-to-end encrypted. end-to-end encryption. And I want to test them on that because they also say no backend necessary. So this is like the Supabase style where they're initializing a session right here with a public app ID, a public secret. So whenever you have asymmetric encryption, which I believe they're using asymmetric encryption, if they're using symmetric encryption, this would be the secret key. So I have trouble imagining they're doing that. So I think this is your public key, and so public-private key pair, you're using asymmetric encryption. I am having a hard time understanding how they could encrypt the username and password in transit if they have a public key. I think they would give a public, I think they would have the same problem that Supabase has, which is the email address would be unencrypted. Maybe everything else is encrypted. I'm actually having, okay, UUID v4. Maybe this is the trick here. Anyway, I'm kind of curious, but I'm not going to do it today because of those red flags I mentioned. But maybe the UUID v4 is the secret to the secret. Whoa, meta secret. Whoa, Inception, dog. The secret to the secret. So maybe that's how they're able to actually encrypt the username and password in transit. I know we have HTTPS. It's like, John, don't worry about it. It's like, no, I'm still worried about it. At least with Supabase, in a password reset scenario, the JWT plaintext is in your URL. So if I'm like streaming, someone could grab that and figure out my email. I personally don't care if you know my email. In fact, I encourage you to email me if you have issues. But like my users, I don't want exposed to that. My users, everything should be secure. You shouldn't have JWT showing up in the URL. So I'm generally sus on these like serverless authenticators because I haven't seen it done well yet, but I'd be really curious if Userbase does it well. Anyway, so process of elimination, we don't want these guys, we don't want Okta. Magic is super cool. I do like Okta. I do like Magic. I do like Auth0. Auth0 is like my tried and true, never fails, but it's also, in my experience, it's like the older school, more steps to get it done. And then I haven't reviewed their pricing recently, but last time I used it, it was like really hard to get any good functionality for free out of them. Maybe they liberalized that since there's more competition these days. Last but not least, Nextauth. What do we notice immediately? It has next in the name. It's built from the ground up for Next. So, and then Magic is newer, and it's known for having these Magic logins, which I think are really cool if they're done correctly. If they're done incorrectly, you get a JWT plaintext in your URL. So basically, the ones that I'll consider are Nextauth, Magic, and Auth0 in that order. So I'm going to try Nextauth first. In fact, I've worked on, I have like a day job where we use Nextauth, and we've enjoyed it a lot. So I'm going to go Nextauth first, second Magic, third Auth0. There could be issues with any of these, but that's what we're going to try. So then, now that I've decided the provider and I've decided the framework, we're going back to where's my starter, right? So I want Next, I want TypeScript, I want React, I want Nextauth now, and then I do want Redux. These are the things that I want, and then there's a bunch of like negotiables. Those are the things that I really want. I could actually take or leave the serverless architecture in this case. I do want a backend, but whether it's like a traditional Express or truly serverless, I'm actually fine either way. So with all these requirements, what kind of starter do I have? That's how you would go find out. I happen to know that a starter does exist like this on the Versal platform. And so we're going to go for that. But if you didn't know, if you're like, I know my requirements now, but I don't know what starters exist, just go Google it. And I would put like a 2-hour kind of rule of thumb on this, that it's worth it for you to literally just Google around for 2 hours looking at different starters before jumping into one. I just kind of happen to know about one that meets all those requirements. And then in general, my rule of thumb is if you don't find one that works within 2 hours, take your best guess and we can tweak some stuff. Like if I had one that met all those requirements but it didn't have TypeScript, adding TypeScript myself is actually not that hard. If I had one that met all of those but it didn't have Nextauth, Adding next auth to an existing project isn't that hard. Here's what would be hard, like converting create React app to support all those. Or frankly, if it was missing next. If it had everything else, it's got, it wouldn't make sense to have next and next auth. But let's say it had auth 0 is for free, or magic is for free, but not using next. And it is typed, and it is React, and it has Redux, but it's not using next. Moving those over into the next framework, that would be rough. And some of this stuff you just pick up through experience, like the trade-offs, the actual magnitudinal difficulty of certain transitions versus others. Some of that's just experience. But I like that 2-hour rule of thumb. And yeah, if you can identify the level of importance of a particular library, and any collection of libraries that you're going to build an application out of, your library stack, those libraries will have differing levels of importance. And so it's hard to do. Sometimes it takes experience. But I think if you just think about it, in some cases you can figure it out. Which ones are important? At least you can figure out some of them. And React is going to be the most important, because all these other things are building on top of React. If you don't have React, how are you going to use Redux? Please don't come at me and say, well, technically you can use Angular with Redux. Yes, technically you can. It's a terrible idea. Practically speaking, Redux is made to go with React. If you don't have React, how are you going to use Next, right? So we know React comes first, then there's like Next and Redux. And you could say that like these are kind of at the same level, but really, Next doesn't have any other alternatives, and Redux does have some alternatives. So I would say Next is more important from that respect. It's more essential. It's less negotiable. Is this making sense? So we need React. We need Next. Then, like, I don't know about the word need, but like the next level of importance that I would put would be, frankly, I would say Auth is more important than Redux. Because it's really hard and expensive to switch auth providers, in my experience. It's not easy to switch out of Redux, but it's easier to go put an alternative in there. So that's kind of how I'm thinking through it. At least, even if you don't have a bunch of experience, you ought to be able to figure out, okay, React is non-negotiable, and the framework on top of React, Next, is non-negotiable. And if I'm using Next, and if I need an auth provider, this is where things might get fuzzy, but I think you'll probably be able to get this far. If I have Next and I need an auth provider, let me use Next auth, and then maybe it's like a question mark after that. But those first 2 or 3, you should be able to figure out even if you don't have that much experience. Okay, I digress. So that's the last item on the agenda, is picking out the starter and getting it spinned up. So we are about 30 minutes in right now, and I think we'll probably go for another hour. Hopefully we can cover that scope, and maybe not. So let's dive into the WinCred issue. I'm not going to show you what I have in my credential manager, but basically this is how to get to the credential manager on Windows. This is going to be a Windows-specific issue. If you're like a Mac person, if you're watching this later, just fast forward maybe 10, 15 minutes. If you're live, I'm going to try and make this quick, but this is how you get to the credential manager. Look for anything that says GitHub and just delete it. Some Stack Overflow article. So how did I come to this? Let's start with the command line issue. It says, please see this. You go over here. It talks you through like what is a token and why use a token. In one of the moon logs, like I went through all of this before. So if this explanation doesn't make too much sense, you can go watch that. But basically, there's the link to creating a personal access token. You go to your GitHub settings, developer settings, and generate a token. And then you use that token. This is the irony. You use that token. It is technically, from a Git point of view, still a user passname combination. It's still a user password combination from Git's point of view. But the way GitHub parses it, it can tell whether you're using the key or not. The token, that is. It can tell if you're using your token So GitHub knows, oh, you put in some string here. It's either your GitHub password, one of your GitHub tokens, or none of the above. Like GitHub can understand that, even though Git doesn't actually know. So as far as Git can tell, it's still username and password, which is why I think the error message is confusing. But it does make sense why WinCred would grab my token possibly without me knowing. Because like this was working for me, but I don't know if I like restarted my computer or got a Windows update or something. And I did have multiple WinCred rows for GitHub. So that could also be a problem. And I've seen that in the past. So in the past, what I've done is just clear them all out. It'll prompt me. I'll give it the good, and we'll be good. And if that fails, we will do an SSH key, which is what we usually do in a corporate environment anyway for enterprise GitHub. So I can walk you through that if I have to, but hopefully we'll get the token to work. Okay. So we go to GitHub, right? Close this, close this. Cool. So let's go to GitHub. Probably keep that one. Token stuff, user base, close, HTML. Yep. Cool. So like I said, I went to, so after I found all of this and I was like, hey, I already did this. Then I just Googled the issue and here's a Stack Overflow result that I got. And then this guy basically says like, it could be WinCred. So then I checked my git config, and I think I can show you this. I think this is safe. Yeah, the only thing in here is my email, and this is my public email. I'm happy for you to email me at anyway. So what I realized is that this is not what I put in my git config. So I put a password in here, and my password was my token string. And now it's gone. And what's here instead is credential helper WinCred. And so I was like, oh gosh, okay, so it's WinCred. So that's how I figured out that it's WinCred, is I checked my git ignore. If you like, it's easy to find where your git ignore is, just Google it. But basically, mine is in my Windows user folder. Okay. So this guy's like, yeah, it could be WinCred. See this answer for how to fix it. So we go to this answer, and I had previously upvoted it like years ago. So this is not the first time WinCred's given me issues, but basically the answer is if you want to reset it, delete it out of WinCred, try to do a git operation, and you should get a prompt. Okay. Got like a stuffy nose. Okay, so that's how we got to what we're doing now, which is I go to my credential manager, clear it out, and now we are going to go get that developer token. So sign in, drop down settings, then we go to developer settings, then we go to personal access tokens, okay? So this is the token that I previously made. I think it's toast. I just need a new one because the only place that it was recorded was within Windows credential, and I deleted that record. So we'll delete this token. Great. So we'll generate a new one. I'm going to take this off screen. Oh, it did the ... anyway. All right, cool. Good job being secure, GitHub. Yeah, so check my previous moon log for how to make these, but basically I'm going to call this gaming. I'm using my gaming computer, so I'm going to call it gaming computer local dev 4. If I can type. Okay. I'm going to expire it in 90 days. I want full repository access, GitHub action. I don't have a need for package registry at this time. Maybe read. And like, if I need to do that stuff, I'll have a different token. Orgs and teams, no. I don't have any of those currently. Full control of user public keys. I'm going to skip that. Repo hook. Create GIS. Yeah, maybe. Or GIS, I don't know. Access notifications, sure. Read email address. Follow and unfollow users. Yeah, we can do all that. Delete a repo. I don't want a programmatic repo deletion function. If I'm going to delete a repo, I'm going to go click through the UI. Okay. Read and write team discussions, leave it alone. Enterprise, leave it alone. GPG, leave it alone. Okay, so really, I think these are the permissions I need. Yeah, I don't think I'm uploading a package to the package registry. I don't know. If we get an error, we'll make a new one. Oh, great. Now you know my token. Okay. I'm going to immediately delete this. And we will, and I'll generate another one and I'll go off screen. I thought it was going to give me some kind of warning or something. So this will be 5. So you can see what I'm clicking through, and then I'll take it off screen so that you don't actually see it. Read packages. Okay, cool. Thank you for your patience. Cool. So I got this new top secret thing. Refresh the page, and now it looks like this. Okay. I think all I have to do is git config and maybe even just git push. So let's git push and see if it prompts me, and if it doesn't prompt me, if WinCred. So when I git push, Git should try to access WinCred, and WinCred should be like, oh shit, I don't have anything anymore. Let me ask the user, and a window should pop up. So if that happens, great. If that doesn't happen, then I would need to git config and actually put my token into my git config, and I would need to take the additional step of banning WinCred, because as we saw last time I did it, I didn't ban WinCred, and WinCred just rolled over it, and that's what we want to avoid in the future. So I'm going to just try and git push. Wants to sign in using GitHub, great. Authorize, yep. VS Code can have everything. Always allow VS Code to have everything. Oh, thanks for displaying my auth token on the screen, you jackass. Okay. Allow an extension. Yes. Well, that was really complicated for nothing. So what we just saw, just to make it clear, WinCred recognized. No, we didn't actually deal with WinCred. Yeah, we did. There's some interoperability between VS Code and WinCred that I'm not aware of. So Git tried to access WinCred. WinCred said, oh shit, I don't have a token. I thought it was going to prompt me, but instead what it did is somehow it communicated with VS Code, and VS Code just said, hey, let me go get my own new token. And it just generated, let's go see. It just generated its own token. Is it going to be here? That's really kind of freaky, to be honest with you, because it isn't even showing up here. Not exactly sure how that works, to be honest with you. Okay, let me close GitHub or VS Code. This is not a real test. I think I would really need to like restart my whole computer, but I'm just going to close VS Code and open it. What I'm doing is I want to make sure that it's not a temporary token that's just in memory. I want it to be a persistent token. I'm looking at my git config. Nothing has changed. Let me check my credential manager. GitHub. Yeah. Okay, so there it is. In my credential manager, there is now, it's like a special VS Code token. It's not just a Git token. It is a VS Code dev.github-authentication. Here, I think I can like shrink my credential manager screen and show you this. Yeah, so there's a few other things on here, but I don't care. It's shrunk enough. So you see this one at the bottom? VS Code devs code. Anyway, Thanks, VS Code. Just let VS Code handle it. I didn't have to jump through all those hoops after all. It would be nice if they told me that, right? Like, hey, you're using a token. Is there anything about VS Code in here? VS never shows up. So that would have saved me a bit of time, but whatever. We're moving on. And we can just verify GitHub. This is Futurecaster. I want to look at Starboi. Starboi's updated. Great. So now we're going to implement the JSON import export feature. And then we're going to push it since I have, let's install and update. Let's do that. Maybe that'll, it's going to be totally fine because it's in WinCred. So it's going to be persistent storage. Okay, great. Saying there's an open change somewhere. I think it's my bookmarks probably. Yep. I version control my bookmarks. Don't judge me. Okay, so we restarted VS Code. It's going to be totally fine. We're going to make the JSON import export change, push that. That will be another test that the WinCred auth token is persistent, although I'm like very confident that it is persistent. And then we'll move on to our Rockstarboi. So ETA, we're looking like 20 minutes out, basically. Close the other tabs. So we have page anecdotes. And what we noticed is that if we add content editable to the card, it freaks out a little bit, didn't it? Oh, let me spin up my server again. So I think when I did design mode, there were no errors. However, design mode gives a negative affordance. What's an affordance? An affordance is an indication to the user that they can do something. And the negative affordance with design mode is that it told the user, you can change my title, Starboi. When really you can't. That's not really editable. They can goof it up on their screen. As soon as they refresh, it's not going to persist. So I don't actually want them editing that. So for that reason, design mode is not my first pick. It's going to be my last pick, or I just might not do it. So there's basically three options. One is design mode, two is HTML content editable attribute, and then three is good old-fashioned forms, aka the right way. But I don't want to do that for reasons of LOE, basically time spent, level of effort. I want to keep this quick and easy. So let's just double check my design mode theory. We'll turn it on, right? And then, yeah, I can do all this stuff now, but I don't get the chipmunk error that we saw. Okay, now let's refresh. Let's go to the card. And if I recall correctly, the chipmunk error, we could maybe put it on the whole section. Let's do that. Content editable equals true. Actually, I don't think I need equals true. I think I just need the, I think in HTML it's implied true if it's there. It's sort of like a truthy check. Okay, so there's a chipmunk error. I was thinking maybe if I put it there, I get rid of the chipmunk error, but that does not appear to be the case. Object.fetch messages, invalid response provided by the IPM backend. What I want to check first is I want to make sure this isn't just one of my browser extensions. Integrated pest man, nope, that's not it. So like, am I seeing a real error, or is this an error? Is this an error with like my personal computer that no one else would see? What is this talking about? My error is not coming up, basically. Oh, Grammarly, there it is. So this is from Grammarly. So I think there's a good argument here that I don't care. Yep. So Grammarly is like, oh no, I'm unable to communicate with the Grammarly backend from my localhost right here. I think that's not a big deal. Yeah, and I think that error might show up even if everything was well formed using proper forms. I'm not sure about this. Okay, we can just turn off the Grammarly. Yeah, if I turn off the Grammarly plugin, there's no error. Okay, let's prove it. I'm like pretty sure. By the way, Grammarly's great, guys. I'm a big fan of Grammarly. I don't want to remove it. I just want to like turn it off for a minute. Cool. I'm a big fan of Grammarly. When I was writing my dissertation, it saved me hours and hours and hours and hours. At least days, if not. Okay, maybe weeks is dramatic, but it saved me days. Yeah. Okay. So what we're going to try is content editable. And it would be nice just to put it on this section here instead of putting it like on every card. I think I can delete the whole HTML fragment. This is good, actually, because I want the ability. So why put it on the section versus putting it, oh, it's all downcase, isn't it? Okay. But why put it on the whole section versus putting it on every card? Okay, there's a few reasons. Let me try putting it on the card, and can I still delete the card? So one thing is just like less is more. If you can get the same effect with fewer lines of code or even fewer characters, that's better, and it reduces the so that's one reason, like technical efficiency. We would often talk about like don't repeat yourself. However, thanks to React, I'm not repeating myself because this is just a loop. So I would put on every card would be like here. So I actually wouldn't repeat myself any less, but it would be less repetition in the DOM. But I think that's all minor concerns. This appears to be a bigger concern, is that I can't delete the card itself if I put it on the card. So by putting it on the section, I'm able to delete an entire card, which is a good feature because from my JSON point of view, I would like to add and remove cards. I also don't think I can add a card here when it's within the card. So we want to add it to the whole section, which I hadn't even really thought about. Content editable. Let's see. Okay, well, React is telling me to do this, so whatever. So refresh the page. A component is content editable and contains children managed by React. It is now your responsibility to guarantee that none of those nodes are unexpectedly. This is probably not intentional. Yes, it is. It is intentional. This is like not your best practice that you would do in prod, but we're doing it. So can I get another card? It looks really funky, doesn't it? I would rather just have like an add card button than try to expect people to like try to copy and paste a whole card, because that doesn't seem to work well. But I can delete a card fairly easily. Boom. Cool. So that's looking good. So what I want to do now is an add card button. Anecdote card. Page anecdotes. It will be within my page. And this is where I would like to have material, because the material button's really nice. But like, but I'm not going to do that right now. So we're gonna have an ugly button, but Rockstarboi will have a pretty button. Okay. So this is Anecdotes as imported. So we're going to change this, and this is going to be imported Anecdotes. Okay, and then we're going to have state. Oh, that's a type. Yep. Okay, so imported Anecdotes, and then where is, here is Anecdotes. We're going to change this to cur Anecdotes. We can actually guarantee that cur Anecdotes is always an array, so we don't have to worry about that. Cur Anecdotes. So where do we put this button basically? I would say the button goes above the white line you see in front of you. In that way, the Anecdotes check thing only determines whether the cards are shown. It does not determine whether the buttons are shown. Okay, so we can split this up, and we'll call this card section. So this will be const card section. Card section has Anecdotes, which is Anecdote. So here's the type. Got some kids in the background. I'm not sure if y'all can hear that. Kind of going wild with mom. So this check will become, instead of whether it's an array, we're going to check whether it has any length. And we're going to guarantee that it's an array. And this is going to use state. So I don't think I need to call it cur Anecdotes. I can just call it Anecdotes, right? Because we renamed Anecdotes to imported Anecdotes. So const Anecdotes, and then set Anecdotes. Set Anecdotes. You know what? I don't think I'm ever going to call set Anecdotes. Yeah, I will. So you may or may not need to actually set Anecdotes. So I'm going to go ahead and trigger it, and we're going to treat this section as if it's a form. We're going to have a key down handler. But the other thing you could do is just whenever you export the JSON, read the physical DOM at that point. But we're not going to do that. We're going to read state. But you could just look at the DOM, and you wouldn't actually need Anecdote state. I'm going to keep it in state, though. So this is going to equal react.useState. And we're going to initialize that with imported Anecdotes. Okay, so so we are going to return like a JSX fragment at the top, and that's going to have buttons, and then that's going to have card section. And I'm actually going to call it Anecdote card section because we use cards for a lot of things and a lot of apps. So the Anecdote card section is more specific. It's a better name. So Anecdote card section is missing. Anecdotes is missing. That's right. Thank you. Anecdotes equals anecdotes, okay? Return type is not a valid JSX element. Okay, so I implemented this as a return type. That's not what I meant to do. Oh. Yeah. Null is not assignable to type. Okay, because it needs to be within the paren. So let me grab that. Okay, so now I'm saying, hey, anecdotes, you are an array of anecdote. Okay, everyone is happier. So here we'll do the length check. Anecdotes.length. Yes. Otherwise null. Okay. Then this section logic will be the card section. So we have a section, we have the content editable, get our unique keys. Looking good. So this is literally just going to render cards. We're not going to add anything about adding cards. Export JSON, import JSON, right? So we're going to have the anecdote card section, and we're going to have a button section. Maybe I could have a better name, but I'll just leave it at that. So this is going to return a section. You can do a div if you want to. I'm going to do a section. And within the section, we have 3 buttons. And, you know, to do compared to Rockstar, who uses material button. So the material button would be more accessible. Frankly, it'd be prettier. And I'm just not going to invest that time into Starboi. But if you're a developer trying to learn from this, being able to compare and contrast these buttons versus the Rockstar buttons is going to be a great way for you to demonstrate your subject matter knowledge. When you go into an interview, knowing stuff is cool, but comparing and contrasting stuff is even better. And why? The reason is because you can't really argue that any architecture is optimal unless you're showing that it's better than something else. So you might be able to, you're probably going to get a job as a junior if you know how to code an architecture or a framework or a programming language. Like if you can do a thing, that's probably enough to get you a job. It's definitely enough to get you a job, but it's not going to make you an intermediate, senior, awesome developer unless you can do a bunch of things and then determine in a given situation which is the best thing to do in that situation and why. That's the difference between a junior and a senior, right? Check my chat messages. I'm not seeing any questions. Feel free to let me know if you have a question. Looks like we have 2 or 3 people on some different platforms. Glad y'all are tuning in. I'll be trying to get through this this Starboi project pretty quickly and over to the Rockstarboi. Okay, great. And Rockstarboi is going to take several streaming sessions to complete. The point of this session is to get to the point where we can initialize that project, right? So we have a button section here. So let's plug it in. That was just a pseudocode previously. So there's the button section. Anecdotes are going to need to go to the button section because whenever we export JSON, we're going to be literally exporting a static file of those anecdotes. So here's another thing. We're going to also pass set anecdotes. Okay? This is where things get iffy. Some React developers are fine. This is going to be called a prop function. A prop function means you take a function and you pass it to a child as a prop. Some developers are fine with that. Some developers are really against that. So this, if you are uber nitpicky, this would actually be a use case for something like React, where you say, I do not pass prop functions down. Like if that's your team rule, what I usually follow is I follow the rule of 1. which says you can do that for one level. You can pass it to your child. And that way it's still really explicit. You know where the state is coming from. If I see a prop function, I know it's coming from the parent. If you don't follow the rule of one, and if you do allow prop functions, things get very messy very quickly. It becomes spaghetti code. It becomes hard to debug and trace really quickly. Because if I see a prop function, I don't know where that state's coming from. It's kind of magical. It could come from the parent. It could come from the grandparent. It could come from the great-great-great-great-great-grandparent. So it makes debugging it and navigating my code quite difficult. In particular, in the team context, where some developers may have made those intermediate components. You might not even know they exist. If it's my own personal project, I probably know the whole component tree. But on a team, I probably don't. Or at least even if I know the general component tree, I might not have I almost certainly don't know about the latest changes in every component, right? So I follow the rule of one. And so you might say, hey, John, that makes sense on a team, but what about your own personal project? Why don't you have a different rule set? And my answer is, when I'm showing this portfolio to an employer, I want to demonstrate to them that I know how to operate in a team. Even if I'm operating by myself, I'm going to act like I'm operating in a team, right? So I'm going to follow those rules for my personal projects. Here's another reason, just for practice. Part of the reason I develop on my own time is just for practice. And so what do I want to practice and ingrain in myself? Is it those practices that I'll be using everywhere? That's more optimal. I'm using the same practices and techniques everywhere. So I get really, really, really good at them, right? That's more optimal than, well, in this situation, I use these practices. This situation, I use these practices. And what happens is you're not really expert in any of those practices. That's less optimal. That's my thought on the subject. Love to hear if you have different opinions. So I'm going to allow it, set anecdotes. I'm going to allow that to be passed to the button section because I know this is only going to be a one level deep. Button section is going to be the component that actually generates that JSON file, so I'm okay with it. If I had to go another level deep, I would bring Redux in at that point or something like it. So how do we pass a prop function? Just like any other prop. TypeScript helps us know that, like if I'm in the context of the child component, TypeScript is what's going to let me know that this prop is a function instead of just like a normal prop. And then also the naming convention helps. We'll do button section prop types. Usually I'm okay with the inline type like this, especially if it's only one or two properties. Yeah, we'll go ahead and go for that. I think 3 is the point where it starts to get really cluttered. Sometimes it depends on your property name length. Basically, if it's really long and if it's hard to read, break it out into its own dedicated type is my thought process. So anecdotes is an array, is a list of anecdote, and then set anecdotes is a function. It's a React dispatch. Yeah, this is technically the type. Okay. You see how that's kind of messy? Like, because prop functions have a complex type, it almost makes me want to break it out right now. It's going to wrap the line, right? And so like this is harder to read. So let's break it out because it is harder to read. So we're going to call this button section prop types. Some teams will say just always break out your types. Okay. I respect it for consistency, but I'm honestly fine if you want to do 1 or 2 types in line. But if it starts to break the line or if it's complex types, that's when I would say break it out. And almost always by the time you get to 3 or more, you're going to want to break it out, in my opinion. Maybe always break it out is simpler. Just keep it simple, stupid, right? Just always break out your prop types. I say no shade to that. Talk to your team. So this looks good to me. So, right, like this one is inline, but I think it's still fairly readable. Let me know if you think that's confusing. Because it's really not much more work to break that out and just follow the rule, always break it out. So we have button section prop types. Cool. And here we're going to have 3 buttons, 1, 2, 3. So the first button will be import. Let's do, I don't really know, add card, add anecdote. Import anecdote Json, and then export anecdote. Let me know if you think that add should be at the end instead of at the front. My intuition is that we will be adding cards more often than we will be importing JSON, but I could be wrong about that. So I could go either way. So here's 3 buttons. They're kind of ugly. I think it works well enough, but they're not super pretty. And let's just leave them ugly, right? I could float them left. I could add some margin, whatever. Let's just leave them nice and ugly. And that way, it'll be a bigger contrast with Rockstarboi. Anecdote starts to look like a foreign word after you read it enough times. So add anecdote. All it does, we're just gonna. This is gonna be an easy one. We're gonna have some handlers here, and so this will be const handle click add anecdote. I'm a big fan of longer descriptive names. So handle click is your convention for handling clicks. You could even say handle button click. I think that's unnecessary, but if you have a bunch of click handlers of different types, that might be necessary. The point is, if I read this and I didn't necessarily read your component, do I know what this is associated with? And I think the answer is yes. Handle click add anecdote is quite clear that you're clicking this button. And so handle click is going to be repeated across all 3. So I give this add anecdote to disambiguate, right? Make it really clear. So handle click add anecdote, make it a no op for now so that we can quickly throw down all our 3 functions. And that's actually that's the wrong syntax. It's a function like this. And it will take an event. I think that's all that we need to pass is the event. We'll just call it EV. Cool. So it knows it's an event. I think there's something like browser event or click event maybe. Browser event. Native event is another type. So it can't find any of these, so we'll just stick with event. That works. An event which takes place in the DOM. Good. The point here is we really just want to avoid any. Better types are better, but creating complex types has a time and effort investment. And so the more time you spend, there's like a decreasing marginal return. So having those complex types in every case is not necessary. What is really a big deal is to avoid using any all over the place. Okay, so this is a good no-op syntax. No-op means it doesn't do anything, so it's kind of like we're putting that there temporarily while we develop. So next is handle click import JSON. I'll say import anecdotes. And then handle click export. export anecdotes. Okay, great. So these are stub methods. That is, they're temporary methods that don't quite work, but they're a level more accurate than pseudocode. So when we think through like quick development, right, rapid development, you start with pseudocode. It's not even code. You could start with just like talking, but frankly, I like to pseudocode while I talk because I'll forget what I said. So a stub method or a mock method is a step deeper than pseudocode because you're actually writing code. It just doesn't do much or anything. I find that to be a useful step when developing is stub out your functions. If you have a bunch of functions and you know what they all are going to be, stub them out and give them that descriptive name. Again, to remind myself, in 20 minutes I might forget what I was doing. But if I have the stubbed method with the method name, I'll be like, oh yeah, I still got to do that. You might even do a to-do comment. So that would be more like pseudocode, but if just get it out, write down your plan, whether you're using to-do comments, pseudocode, whatever, write down your plan before you get into it. Literally just, there's a bunch of reasons to do that, but one is literally just because you might forget what you're doing. Okay, so handle click anecdote. So should be on click equals handle click anecdote. Void is not assignable to mouse event handler. It's not on click, is it? Let's see. React button on click. It is downcase. What? That's upcase. Official React docs, really great. Big fan. They're using a class component here. Arrow function and render. Using an arrow function creates a new function each time, which may break optimization. So we don't want to do that. They're saying it's not a big deal, but if you have a performance issue. So we could turn this into an arrow function. I'd prefer not to. Oh, types of parameters EV and event are incompatible. Ah, okay, great. HTML button element. So it's basically saying there's a type incompatibility, which is kind of annoying, but it's better because it gives us the complex type. So there's no problem with the code. They're saying, hey, let's use this better type, which I am appreciative for, right? Mouse event is not a generic. Okay. You just want me to do this? The expected type comes from property onClick, which is declared here. Detailed HTML props. What goes to onClick? Is there an element passed? It seems like I might have gotten the, it's not just the event. There might be the element passed too. So handle click is having no properties at all right here. Okay, handle click E. So it is just event. Yeah, if I any it, the error goes away. So the issue here is in the type. Any is useful for debugging. I don't like to leave it as any, but it's useful for debugging. You can discriminate between a type error and like actual code error if any makes the error go away. Type mouse event is not generic. You're probably using the DOM mouse event. Try using React mouse event. Ooh, thanks, Stack Overflow. So, bam, problem solved. News to me. So the React mouse event and the DOM mouse event are two different things. Okay, great. So this is like a rather complex type, so it's better. But you see how I was able to get it without putting that much effort into it. Yes, I had to do a Google, but VS Code told me what the type should be. Okay, and I believe it's going to be the same for all these bad boys. So let's go ahead and change that. Good deal. We're going to put the on click in all these places. Change the name out. You know, for some people it seems like I'm going really slow. For some people it seems like I'm going really fast. If you think I'm going really slow, you're right. I'm like slowing down to kind of like think about some of this stuff. That's just the Grammarly thing again, right? Yeah, that's actually React giving us a warning about content editable, as it should, but I know what I'm doing. If you think I'm going slow, you're right. If you think I'm going fast, it's just muscle memory. You'll be going faster than this once you get in your flow state, right? So this is looking good. Add anecdote. Okay, so we actually have to implement add anecdote. Handle, click, add anecdote. What we're going to do is set anecdotes, and it's going to be anecdotes concat an empty object. Let's actually define. This will be a constant. This will be empty anecdote. And what we're going to do here is yeah, actually empty anecdote could go in the custom types. I don't know how y'all feel about this, but I think this is a really great way to dry up your code. So some purists might be mad that I'm putting something that's not a type in a type file. But here, if I do this, I can just use type of and so I like to put my types in my sort of like default objects and like utility strings and a bunch of stuff like that, all in one file. Parsing, comma, yep. I like to have it all in one file. It almost becomes kind of like a service, like an anecdote service. That would be what it is in like Angular or Vue. Okay, so now we import type. Let me see if I can just import anecdote, and if it should just know that it's a type. So I import anecdote, and I'll also import empty anecdote. Okay. So concat, and I'm going to destructure empty anecdote. So it's going to be a new one. Triple dot destructuring operator. Okay. Format on save. Love it, love it. Let's see. That should do it. So now I got these empty anecdotes, you see? And it is adding it to the bottom. I think I'd rather have it add it to the top because it's harder to tell, you know? So let's do this, empty anecdote.concat anecdotes. Is not an array type. Yeah, this is true. Right, okay, I just needed a parenthesis there. Okay, so the concat is chaining this parenthesis. Is not an array type. It should not matter that it's not an array type. Maybe I need to do this. Destructure it into an object, into an array. Yep, okay. So when I destructure the object, it's flattening it out into an array of I think key value pairs, which is incompatible with the array of anecdotes. So I need to destructure it and recapture it into an object again before putting it into an array. So basically just needed these wrapping braces. Okay. Yep. Whoa, did that just add 2? Okay, it's because I had the existing state because I didn't refresh the page. So 1, 2, 3. All right, great. So I'm going to commit where we're at. We're not done, but this is a really great pausing point, right? So I'm actually going to commit these separately. So this will be feat empty anecdote. So that's a new feature, is this empty anecdote export. And then over here, we're going to do feat handle click anecdote and stub other button section methods. Okay. Always leave that empty space after your one-liner. If you can't summarize what you did in one line, add that empty line, and then starting on the third line, you can add more detail. We try to keep that first line really short. Once you have that empty space and then down there, you can put a lot of content there and you're just making people happy. You're not annoying people. If you have a really long top line, you might annoy some people. Push it. So there was like a ... It was sort of moving and now it went away, which means that the push process terminated. I'm going to double check that the termination was a success termination. Here we can see handle click anecdote 15 seconds ago. So that worked. So we have validated the personal access token is persisting across VS Code open and close, VS Code update. We didn't do system reboot, but like whatever. We confirm Grammarly error goes away. React itself is giving us a proper warning, but we can live with that. And frankly, it's good that it's emitting that warning. I just happen to know what I'm doing and I know that it's okay. Okay, great. Add anecdote method is working. Now that I add an anecdote, I want to foobar. And every time I type, I want my internal state to know, right? So right now, React doesn't know what I just did, specifically because content editable is a little bit nasty in that regard. So I have to tell React what I just did. If I was using like this use form hook, every keystroke React would already know. Here I have to tell it to update state. I have to set the state. So set anecdotes. When I type, we're gonna have the yeah. So there's two ways that I could do this. One is every keystroke, and the other is I could just have React check at import export anecdote time, which seems like that actually seems more optimal. In general, I'm a big fan of having the DOM very closely reflect the internal React state. So to get that close match, I would want to do it on every keystroke, right? However, thinking about this use case specifically, that really close match isn't necessary. It's fine to have some decoupling. So I kind of think that we can just check whenever I export anecdotes. And an advantage here is that I don't need to send the set anecdote prop function. I don't need to send it to the card section. The card section literally doesn't care. which is nice just because in general, I'm not a fan of the prop function pattern. I do allow the rule of one, and this would be okay with the rule of one. But even the rule of one, I don't like to pass prop functions if I don't have to. So, we are going to, we're going to go for it. And we're going to just have the button section is the only one that's aware, and it already is aware, and it has to be aware of both anecdote state and the set anecdote prop function. So we're going to test out letting that be the only component with any awareness. So we will we're only going to update that anecdote state when they hit the export anecdote button. So the tricky part here is why does the anecdote state go to the larger component at all? We know that we need to pass in the imported anecdotes. Yeah, that's why, because if I import, I want to propagate. So it's really not the export use case, it's the import use case that makes us have use state up here at the top. If the import doesn't exist, I could have the use state here in the button section, and even my top level page wouldn't even care. But whenever I import, I want to propagate it through the whole tree, and so that's why the whole tree needs to be aware. Cool. But I want to export first because I really only have one file that I can import right now. I guess we could write the import thing. Yeah, let's do it. So how do we handle click import anecdotes? We're going to need an input field, not just a button. We're going to need an input field that's like a file reader, basically. Okay. I know how to do a lot of this stuff literally just from muscle memory. It's not because I'm that smart or anything, but if you didn't know, you just Google it. React read file, right? And if React read file is like not the optimal search thing, give it like 5 checks and read through. Especially, we can trust Stack Overflow. I'm just telling you now. But you'll build up a repertoire of trustworthy sites. Dev.to. A lot of developers go and blog there, so it's kind of hit or miss. StackBlitz is really great. Gist is kind of hit or miss, but these are all decent. Medium is decent. So Pluralsight's great. So it's like a whole skill. Googling is a whole skill, literally, and it's underrated too. Whittington commented. Let's see, what did Whittington say? My soft skill is being able to find the softest pillows. Oh, gosh. Cool. So some of these sources are hit or miss. You'll acquire like knowledge about that as you go through them. But Stack Overflow specifically is a trustworthy source. Doesn't mean every question or answer is trustworthy. It means as a platform it's trustworthy. And specific question and answers are going to be better or worse. The thing that's really cool about Stack Overflow is it makes that quality really transparent through these scores. So like a bad answer would have a score that's like 1, 2, 0, or negative. Honestly, by the time you get to 3, it's probably going to be a decent answer. Especially if it's a low volume page. If this is like a niche subject not a lot of people touch, there just might not have been many eyes on it and many opportunities to vote. So a low score answer, frankly, even 0 or 1 is worth a shot if it's like the only answer and if it's a low volume page. How do I know that it's a low volume page? There's a question, there's like one answer, there's like no comments. The question score is like 1 or 2 or 3. Those are indicators that it's a low volume page. Now, if there are a lot of comments and a lot of answers and the question is still like 1, 2, or 3, what that indicates is that it's a controversial answer or possibly a controversial question, controversial answer, or possibly a bad question or answer. Because once you have volume, we expect it to either go up pretty quickly or to go down pretty quickly. Stack Overflow is pretty well known that some people on the platform are savage. And if they think your answer's bad, they'll downvote you. Frankly, they should. Now, hopefully they're not a jerk in the comments. But you can see here there's a 12 and a -1. So use the 12, right? And Stack Overflow will float those top answers to the top, so you don't need to scroll through. Well, what the heck? That says 32. So apparently I'm wrong. I thought it would, okay, votes. Okay. So the default setting appears to be time. So whoever gave the first answer will be floated up, which is not great. I want the best answer floated up. So you might need to click that votes tab. Anyway, so this is how you can use a file reader API. File reader is built into a modern web browser. If you're using IE5, you might not find it, but like modern Chrome, modern Edge, modern Firefox, they all have file reader built in. And so this is how you can use file reader inside of a click event on your input. So I guess this would be a change event. Cool. Yeah, so when you click the input, we actually don't want to trigger the event when you click it, right? We want to trigger the event once the upload is done. And so that would be a value change, not a click event. So even me as a senior developer, I might have missed that and had to double check and go to the same page as you. Okay, great. They're using a class component. It doesn't matter because we're looking in the context of this function, and that's going to work whether it's a functional component or not. So don't get freaked out like, oh crap, they're using class. Oh, they have a render function. It's so different. No, like look in their snippet and narrow the scope of what we care about, and you'll realize that this is totally applicable to us. And they're using an async, so let's do it async. I probably wouldn't have done that either. Did I just collapse something? What just happened? Boom, boom. Handle click import anecdotes. So we're going to rename this guy. We're going to call it handle change import anecdotes. Let's go over here. Handle change. The export will still be a click event because we don't need a file input to do an export operation. Does that make sense? With the import, they're going to upload a file. So we actually have to change it from a button to an input. So there's not really 3 buttons here. They're going to look similar, but really, technically, one of them is a file input. You can see you got to put type file on it, so we'll do that. So one of these is not like the others, but that's okay. Element no p, type equals file. And this will be an on change. And then we handle on change import anecdote JSON. Okay. Async, we're leaving that because Stack Overflow told us to. I don't really know if it's necessary. Prevent default, sure. And I'm gonna grab and like we'll make this async, and then I'm gonna grab the rest of this and put it in my function. We can add some line breaks up here if you want to, if that makes it easier for you to read. Okay, so he used E and I'm using EV for event. I like EV instead of E because E ambiguates between event and error. Here, HTML button mouse event. So this is no longer a mouse event, I think. So let's, yep, change event handler. So TypeScript and VS Code are helping us here. A lot of people like to talk about like how much better WebStorm is. I haven't seen it. Like the TypeScript integration and VS Code is literally clutch. Cannot find name, change event handler. So this is cool. So I click it and it says, hey, you can import it from React, or we can just do React dot, which I'm going to do not because it's better, but for consistency with the mouse event. But this could equally just, you see how I import React right there? I could do this and then use it without the React dot prefix. I'm not going to do that. Okay. Frankly, I like this because it makes it really explicit that this is the React handler. I don't have to go reference the top of the page or hover. I just immediately know. So I really don't like to even use effect and use state. I like to maintain the React prefix personally. If there's some tree shaking optimization to be done there, let me know. I haven't run into that issue, but maybe there's a gain to be had. And if you don't know what tree shaking is and you want to know, holla at your boy. So it's saying that prevent default doesn't exist on this. It's Angular. Here's a cool trick. So it's saying that it doesn't exist. I can hold the control key and click it, and TypeScript will dive into the definition. So I can be like, well, okay, what does exist? So this is an event handler for a change event. Okay. What's on a change event? It has a target. Okay, so what I think is that we need to do like ev.native event maybe. So we don't have a reference, yeah. Native event does not exist. We don't actually have a reference to the DOM event, which we want. Here's event handler, bivariance hack, wow. Yeah, so we have a synthetic event, and what we want is a reference to the native event. I'm gonna actually just comment this. I don't think we need to do prevent default when we're working with the React event. If there's an error, we'll come back and deal with that. But I'm going to skip that for now. I don't think we need to deal with it. Comment this original code. And I'll put a debugger in here, which will help me make sure that I'm getting what I want. But I think this is what we were looking at. It's the target thing. So change event handler, change event target. So I think we want to look at, and that's in the value. So the key name is target and the type is event target. So I think we want to read the target value. So, object is possibly null. Yeah. We can easily handle that like this. So this is the nullish coalescer, which is available in recent versions of JavaScript. It's supported by the latest browsers. If you need to support an older browser, you could do something like this. And basically, it's just saying only read result if there's an object there. If event.target is null or falsy, the whole thing will be the value of target, which would be null, falsy, undefined, an empty string, something like that. Okay. So just put a question mark there. Does not exist on this type. Okay, something bad is happening. So why is it saying that the target does not exist on the change handler type? Okay. Oh, EV is shadowed here. So there are two different things called EV. So that's bad. So this should be called EV onload. And this will be called EV on change. So there were two different things being called EV. Okay, so EV onload does have a target. EV on change. So here I'm hovering, hover on progress event. Hey VS Code, wake up, dude. Yeah. Okay, I thought it was going to give me type information, but it didn't. So event extends synthetic event, extends base synthetic event. So here are the things. Yep. This is the native event. That's what I believe, but it also has something called target. Why does it say that it doesn't exist? Let's Google it. I can just grab this error. I'm also going to put a debugger there. We're going to Google it. We need this change handler event. Yeah, this is not really helpful, is it? Okay. So in this case, I'm going to, yeah, in this case, look, and it's giving it a different color, which is an issue. Change event handler. So I think maybe this is supposed to be a function. Change event handler, mouse event. Is there something called a change event instead of a change event handler? Yep, so there's a change event which does have a target. So we're looking at the difference between a change event and a change event handler. Object is possibly null. I think null cannot go into read as text. So we will say if this thing exists, so if that thing exists, let's read it. So I think that was the issue, was that we had typed it as a change event handler when it was actually a change event. I'm going to debug here and make sure that it really is an event at runtime and not a handler. Okay, so but now we have a successful compile. So let's go mess with it. Input is a void element tag and must neither have children nor use dangerously set HTML. Okay. So there's an issue here. A component is content editable. We know that's fine. Error occurred in the input element. Input is a void element tag. It can't have children. Yep. Okay. So this should be written differently. So we will use a input text. How do we do that? Input button text. What's the, there's an attribute name. Add to favorites. So it's value. Okay. Get rid of some of these line breaks. Consider adding an error boundary. Error boundaries are great. I'm not going to do that right now, though. That could be another. I'm going to jot down some differences between Starboi versus Rockstarboi. Starboi versus Rockstarboi. Material, prettier, error boundaries, Redux, Prisma, and Next. And Versal. And Next Auth. So 8 differences right there. That's pretty good. Pretty good. So if we comment out this button, everything should be compiling and working. Right, so we know that this button is the source of the concern. Let's comment out that value thing. In this case, it's looking good. So we know that the value attribute is the root cause. This is recommended on an ordinary input field, but maybe it's different for JSX and React, so we have to double check on that. So what we Googled was input button text. Let's try React input. Let's try React file input text. Value still seems to be like value. Oh, here's input. Where's file? File. Hey guys, where's the part where I tell it what it can say? So we could use a separate label component. I guess that's the way we're going to do it. Okay. Using label with input is a great practice. So I thought this is unnecessary, but we'll go ahead and do it. So the way that you do this with a label is like so. Okay, import Anecdote.json. See, this is not what I want. I want choose file to say import Anecdote.json. So the label is technically external. Let me check out this input. Input HTML attributes. So this is a generic type that's saying like anything any of the inputs have are chill. Therefore, it should let me do value. Change default text. Yep. This is the right question. I don't believe there's a reliable cross-browser solution for that. You could, however, do something like this. Here the input is paired with corresponding label. Oh gosh, this is one of those gross, weird, you have to do different cross-browser things. So we're not going to do all that. We're just going to change and we're going to do labels, and then we'll give the section like a background. For consistency, I want labels to be everywhere. It's hard to make it consistent, right? Because the button just has the text on itself. And maybe it's okay that it looks different since it behaves differently, but I would rather it change the way the text is on it. Flash, get out of here, dude. Okay, so I'm actually going to do the gross visibility hidden thing. Cool. And then we will just make the label look like it's a button. Whenever you associate an input and a label, you need to associate it by ID. So we'll give the input an ID. ID equals import anecdote input. So, and then this will be HTML4. HTML4. And so that's how the label knows that it's associated to that input. Now, and then we're going to give this class. So let's use CSS instead of inline style. I really don't think it's a big deal, but since we already have the CSS going, let's use it. So this visibility hidden will be import anecdote input ID. Import anecdote input. And we'll say visibility hidden. Okay. And then we are going to have import anecdote label. I'm going to make this a class, and I'm going to just call this button-like. In React, we call it class name. In JSX, we say class name instead of class. Let's do button-like, which is a generic class. It's not just for this one. I could use it elsewhere. And it will look like an input button. Okay, so background gray. Okay. Now let's check out what we're working with. Import anecdote JSON. Did I give it the button-like class? Background gray is being ignored. Okay. Why, though? Background gray. Oh, because I shouldn't use the quotes in CSS. Okay. I don't want it gray like that. I want it this background color. Okay. It says that's an invalid color. So I must have copied something wrong. Background color. Okay. Yep. So this is the background color. Cool. So we go to that label. Styles, background color like this. Cool, and now it is the same color. There's a bit of like a border difference there. We'll do this one thing at a time. Button-like. Background color. Okay. Did I do quotes again? Gosh, I'm such a bad. Okay. And if we click the label, it does prompt us. Let's try moving the label out. Because you see how it has like the whole width over here? That's because the hidden button is still right there. Maybe I could make it a display none. Let's see. Does it still work? And it does still work. So I'm going to change it. Instead of visibility hidden, we're going to use display none. I think that will improve our accessibility too, because a screen reader, I believe, will not attempt to even read if it's display hidden. Or, I'm sorry, it should be display none. What am I doing? Display none. None. Cool. And then it still works? Yeah? Okay, great. So we need a little bit of margin or padding. I guess it's padding. So padding is 1:6. And then there's like a border thing going on. Okay. Border 1 pix solid this, and then padding 1 pix 6 pix. Usually I'd prefer rem, but we're trying to literally imitate. So we're gonna literally imitate. It looks taller. This is bad. How about my font size? Font size is 13 1/3 pixels. Font. So 13. Let's do calc 13 plus 1/3 pixels. Calc. Let's try 40/3. I think that's about as close as we're going to get. 13.333 pixels. All right, cool. We'll use that. What an awful thing to do. We're going to do it, though. I'm going to give it a margin that is not reflective of the buttons, but we'll space it out a little. We'll do 1 rem. 0 on top, 1 rem side to side. So now it's like spaced out a little. It actually makes differences hard to detect, but there still is some sort of vertical, either height difference or vertical alignment difference. And I don't care too much about this, so we might leave it looking a little janky. Align items, flex start, yeah? Text align center, I think we're fine on that. Oh, here's the font. That's better. Border width is 2 pixels. Maybe that's the difference. Ew. Nope, that border looks really different. Border color is not propagating. I think this internal light dark thing that I'm doing here is like not. Oh yeah, it's like a what do you call it? It's changing from one to the other. I don't think I can just do this. Yeah, this is definitely taking too much time now. So what I'm going to do is flatten the buttons to make them look like each other. So we're going to do this. Okay. Then we're going to give the buttons button-like as well. So we're trying to make them all look like buttons, but we're not trying necessarily that hard. Class name, ABC. Cool. They all now look stupid, but at least they look like each other. I'm going to change that stupid font size to 1 rem instead of whatever it is right now. Okay. I think it looks fine now. I think we're getting into splitting hairs territory. There's some kind of difference. I can't tell. 178.24, 170. Yeah. So this is like 1 pixel short for some reason. Padding match, margin match. Could be, oh, here's contrast. Good, good. Could be a line height difference. Font match. Let me check line height. This is going to be like the last thing that I check. Okay, so the button line height is normal, it says. Okay. And here the line height is normal, it says. Let me just force it a line height of 1 rem and see if it changes anything. Now those are 22 and this is 23. So we're going to tune that a little bit. We're going to say 18 pixels. This is 24, this is 23. Where'd you go? 16 pixels, 22, 23, 17 pixels. I think we did it. Height of 23, height of 23. How gross that I have to say 17 pixels. So this sort of like style tuning, largely I would get to ignore if I was using material. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L. But I think we're in a pretty good space now. Cool. So I will check this feature in. I'm going to check in the CSS for this will be a style prefix commit message. And this will be style, and we'll call it button-like. Okay. Then over here, I've done quite a bit of work, but I want to clean it up before I check it in. Let's make sure that the file is being read properly. Okay. Import anecdote JSON. GitHub. This is called Starboi. Starboi source pages page anecdotes. So we're just going to import that same JSON. Event. We want to make sure that this has a property called target, and it is the event, not the event handler. So it has a property called target, and then files is truthy. Cool. Length 1. Great. Anecdotes.json. So this is the file that we want. So I can drop that debugger and trust this now. That will be loaded, and it will go into this function onload. I'll drop this debugger because there's already a console statement in there. And I don't believe we need to prevent that default. So if we see the the expected file, I don't want the alert. We'll get rid of that. If we see the expected file, then we're good. Okay, well, here you go. So this is the expected file. Great. So we're good. So I don't want to log it. What I want to do when it gets there is that I want to set anecdotes using so what if there's a bad file? I don't want to set anything. So I'm going to wrap this in an if. This will be JSON. It might be a string at this point in time, so we'll have to check on that. Name, string, date, yeah. So we'll probably have to, we want to parse it, and if it works, so const parsed equals json.parse of JSON. So if there's a valid parsed, then we'll set anecdotes parsed. How can we do this better? So we're only going to parse it if it's a string, right? So we can say type of JSON equals string. Don't even try to parse it if it's not a string, right? Okay, so that's how we get a valid parsed that's type safe. You can see how TypeScript here is forcing me to be slightly more thoughtful and more type safe, and that's a good thing. Now, it's still possible that I could get an invalid JSON string, so I actually want to test that. So let's test the happy path, import anecdote JSON, anecdote JSON. Okay, it kind of worked, but we're not really sure. The time chandler found a special clam. Now what should happen is when I import JSON, that's overwritten. Okay, it did not appear to work. Did not appear to work, so let's debug right here and see what's up. Okay, so I got parsed, and it parsed successfully. So we set anecdotes. So what's the problem? Okay, the problem is that React is not updating those content editable. So I think I need to manually force a React render. So this is actually not a good practice. And I only have to do it because, yeah, force update. This is usually not a good practice, and I'm only having to do this because I'm allowing content editable. Use force update. Create your force update hook. Yep. Cool. And we'll add a note here. Usually this is a bad practice. We are doing this so content editable works because I'm lazy and don't want to implement proper forms. That's going to be another difference between Starboi and Rockstarboi is proper forms. Oh, that will be use form hook, right? What's it called? Use form. Use form. React hook form is the library name. Use form is the method. So we React hook form versus content editable. 9 differences. Stacking up quick. Okay, so let's see if this solves the issue. Close some of these tabs. So we're back here. Value, set value, use state. We're going to do React.useState. Value is declared, but its value is never read. Fine. Let's give credit to Stack Overflow. Look, where'd it go? History. Use. Well, I was trying to give them some credit. Okay. Give me the link to this one, share, copy, and we'll just do a little ref. Ref is like for reference. And so this is for reference where we got this force idea from. Force update is this. Now, use force update is a hook that's kind of like in its own scope, and we are going to use force update. It's going to be right here. Cannot find name, use force update. I wonder why it can't find the name. It's right there. So we really are already forcing the update. Okay, no, we're not. So we're telling React to set state, but we're setting anecdotes. Let me try this one more time without forcing the update. Somehow the anecdotes it doesn't see as an object difference. Set anecdotes, button section. Comment this out for now. Okay. The JSON that we imported, React can't tell that it's any different, and React is actually right. Anecdote.json. So now we'll change this, and now we will try to import it. Yeah, and now it changed. So when React parses it, it notices that the JSON that we imported is the exact same one, as the one that was already there, so it doesn't update anything. So we don't need to use the force thing, which is a real anti-pattern, so we shouldn't do that. What we need to do is tell React that when this gets edited, the state changes. Cool. Or before the file is loaded. No, because I don't want to have multiple listeners on that input button that could potentially conflict. So I'm going to go for putting a key down listener. I know we tried to avoid it, but I'm going to go ahead and go for it. A key down listener on the anecdote card section. So this import JSON is actually working. We just did a really quick, I didn't really talk through it very clearly, but we basically just proved it. I'll do it one more time. I think that destructuring is not necessary. Okay, so the way that we prove this, refresh the page. When I refresh the page, the system automatically imported this JSON file. Now when I make some change and I re-import the JSON file, in React's memory, those objects are not different, so no render change is made. Make sense? So how do I make React think there's a change? I have to change the JSON file. So now that I've done this, it will render that change right there. So this is not a correct solution. It's just a proof of the issue. Now that we know the issue, what we need to do is we need to propagate a change in React's memory space. Okay? So one way you could do that would be with this force function, but that's like really not ideal. So what's better is that React understands that I changed this. Okay? And so that's why we're going to go ahead and check with the key down function. So the state will be updated when I key down. Okay. So key down will be where the content editable thing is, right here. So we're going to do let's do on key up. Let's do on key up, and we'll do handle key up. Instead of key down, we'll do key up. Yeah, that's alphabetically correct. Before I do that, since we know that the proof is correct, I'm going to go ahead and check in these changes because there's like non-trivial changes here. So this will be feature import anecdote. Import anecdotes. Cool. So now we have on key up. So we stubbed it, hit save, it formats. So what happens when we key up? There's an event here, and that is a React.keyboard event. So that's a keyboard event. And with this keyboard event, we're going to want to set state, so we're going to have to pass state through. Set anecdotes. And here we can use the button section prop types, and we can change them to anecdotes. We can call this page anecdote child. Page anecdote child prop types, and then we can reuse it. Okay. Anecdotes, set anecdotes, anecdotes, set anecdotes. Cool. Compiled successfully. Do one little thing, save, check the compiler. One little thing, save, check the compiler. That's why all this format, and also if the formatting fails, that's an indicator that something's wrong. These are micro checks that are really useful to make sure that every step you incrementally make is correct before you end up piling up massive changes. And then you find that there's an error and you're not sure where in your change queue that error came from. Okay. So yeah, basically the same pattern from the import thing. We're going to check the result. No, we don't need to do that. We know, yeah, we're going to check that there's a result, and if there's a result, set it. What if there's no result? What if there's no result? Then that would seem to indicate that we like deleted the whole thing. So we'd want to set an empty array. Yeah. Okay. So const result equals ev dot target. Oh, it's question dot, not dot question. Question dot target. Question dot result. And then if type of result is string, I don't know why it wouldn't be, we're just being defensive. And it's not result, so what would it be? Add event listener dispatch. Okay, so this should not be keyboard event key up. Let's go. I'm trying to understand the type. So here's mouse event key up. Is key up anywhere in here? So key up, keyboard event handler, right? Keyboard event, right? So this does seem to be correct. It doesn't have a target. Okay, so I shouldn't look at target. I want to look at like a value. Key. I don't care what key you just pressed. So this is going to tell me which key you just pressed, but I don't actually care about that. What I want is I want the whole text Yeah, this is why working with forms is easier, because I think I'm going to have to parse that text now. That sucks. Yeah, so this is going to get ugly, but that's going to be why React hook form is so great in Rockstarboi. So change event. So let me not look at the on key up. Let me look at on change, and then I'll say handle change. Hopefully this works. I'm not sure if it will. Handle change. So then we have handle change, and now it's not a keyboard event, it is a change event. And now we have target. I guess I just want the whole target, huh? Text content, that works. Okay, if type of result is string, to do parse. Else if I'm just going to leave it like that. I do have this question like, what if they delete the whole thing? What happens? But we can check that out later. Let's console.log result in this case. Content editable. Event target is not assignable to event target and element. Type form event. form event HTML element. I think this is trying to tell me this is not a form element, so you can't have a change event, which basically means content editable is banned in React, which could be true. So why was key up allowed then? Okay, we will go back to key up then. Can I get a reference from key up to the HTML element? I'm actually not seeing it. Yeah, it's kind of crazy to me. I don't see a way to get the actual element. I can use a DOM ref. I guess that's what I have to do. Okay, so let's go back to handle key up. Handle key up. So this will be react.keyboard event. Okay. On key up. On key up. On key up. Handle key up. Let's capitalize that U. Okay. This is a keyboard event. Now we don't have, so maybe I do have result.target. We'll debug to see if that's a thing. And the other option is a ref. Let's see if I have the target. So this target is the whole card section. Great. So what if I do card section? Yeah, now I need to basically parse it, which is not going to be fun. Okay. So we have anecdote card. Awesome. Get ready for some 1, 2, 3. Yeah, get ready for some super gross DOM parsing. Let's do it. Okay. So we did get elements by tag name. It's going to be as HTML element. Note, this whole DOM parsing thing is basically an anti-pattern. Okay, and so this should, let's double check. I'm not sure if it's a proper array. So now we do get, it's an HTML collection. Array.from, can I do this? Yep, okay. And let's ensure the type of result, result instance of HTML collection. Right. So result instance of HTML element is true. So we're going to check the instance of result instance of HTML element. If that's true, then DOM anecdotes is going to be that. Otherwise, it's going to be null. Let's do an empty array. Let's do an empty array. Okay. Cool, then we get an empty array. So now we can guarantee that DOM anecdotes is going to be an array. So this will be array.from. So turn the HTML collection into an array. So DOM anecdotes is an HTML heading element array. Thank you, TypeScript. Well done. So the question is not whether it's a valid type, but whether it has any length. If it has length, we're going to do this thing. Otherwise, we are going to set anecdotes as that empty array. Yeah, I mean, I don't really think we need to destructure it, but I kind of just do that for like safety. Right. We'll set it as an empty array. We can do that, right? Yeah, cool. Cancel, cancel, cancel. Oh, you're getting rid of my line there? Okay, fine. I think it'd be a little more readable if that line was there, but that's all right. So now we have DOM anecdotes. I'm actually going to call this anecdote headings. I think that's a better name. And then this is where we need a stateless function that is not a React function, it's just plain JavaScript, and it's going to be const parse parse anecdotes by or from headings. And that will take headings. Cool. And it will currently return, so this is stubbed, so it will currently return an empty array. And then headings is has this type. So this is definitely at this point taking longer than I thought it would. Welcome to developer life. Is declared, but its value is never read. Yep. So this would be const anecdotes, new anecdotes equals cool. So this is all looking good. This is a stubbed function at the moment, but that's okay. It should still work. Should have no debuggers right now. Import that anecdote. So I'm expecting it should have reset it to an empty array. So what went wrong there? Oh no, I'm expecting it will have logged. Did I not save or something? Something funky is going on here. Okay. I think this is like parse anecdotes by headings. Here is anecdote headings. Okay. I think this is looking good. Let's refresh the page. Cool. So that was not what I expected. So let's debug right here. I want to get it into a state that I expect, and then I'll commit it before I go further. So it didn't even hit my debugger. Okay. Anecdote cards section, handle key up. Oh, I never handled a key up. Yeah, that was a bad test case. Sorry. I was thinking about import time. All right, so let's go foo. Yep, so I'm getting empty array, empty array. That's great. That works. Cool. And yeah, this system is like really terrible. If you had a bunch of anecdotes, it would get really slow really fast. So definitely don't prefer this to Rockstarboi. Okay. Here we are going to say feet, and this is going to be init parse anecdote by headings. Cool, cool, cool. Direct message. Fire emoji, that's good. Cool. Yeah, no question. Let me double check this one. No questions at the moment. Great. Okay. So we've got parse anecdotes by headings. This is just going to be your good old-fashioned vanilla JavaScript, borderline jQuery days. Because of this approach that we're taking, we're basically ejecting out of the best practices for hooks and things like that. So this is going to be DOM parsing, just DOM parsing. Not much React about it. Cool. So we have heading elements. And what I want to do is for every heading element, I would like to return for every input heading element, return an anecdote object. I actually don't even need to write that note. I'll just say it returns anecdote. And then that kind of like explains it, right? Okay, cool. So we're going to say const new anecdotes, or parsed anecdotes. Parsed anecdotes is initially an empty array. Then we will do some stuff. Then we'll return parsed anecdotes. Yeah. Okay. So for each heading, for const heading in headings. We're going to need all this stuff. Const name equals const date equals, I guess date was never really injected. Just add date right there. What's the other stuff in the name date notes sotar? Name date notes sotar. Here we have name date notes. Cool. So there will be like this. We're actually not using that stuff. Name date notes. Notes is just empty. Oh, here notes says foobar. Okay. So name date notes. Do a little p tag for the date. Anecdote dot date. Do another p tag down here for the notes. See how that looks. So here, yeah, it just puts the date like that. I think that looks good. Maybe float it left. Style, align, text. Left. It'd be more like a span, wouldn't it? So anecdote card is a flex, I think. So we can say margin left 0. I guess we should use align self. This starts to look pretty bad. Like width 20%. I don't think date should take more than that. We just let it be centered. I don't think it's that much of a problem. I don't know. Let me know if you think the left floated date is a big deal. I don't think it's a big deal. So I'm going to leave it alone. So let's get rid of the style. So we have the anecdote date. Then we have notes underneath. Great. We're going to do or in A. So notes, there's none. Notes, here's foobar. Cool. So now we have date. And then we also never put in employer, did we? ABCD, whatever. Employer is IBM, right? Fictionally. So let's go to our typings. Anecdote. And employer. Cool, so now we have the SOTAR, name date employer SOTAR, name date employer SOTAR. This will be we'll do name date employer SOTAR and then notes. Looks good. Name date employer IBM name date employer SOTAR and then notes. Cool. This is looking good. We might check this in. Close others. Let me write out these and then name date employer SOTAR. Name date employer SOTAR notes. Name date employer. Really, I can just do it like this. Const new anecdote. Name date employer situation obstacle task action result and notes. Cool. Close this guy out. Boom. Now it's just a basic object. I'll keep it in 2 lines. In theory, it could be 1, but if we ever want to debug, having it as 2 lines is nice. Parsed anecdotes dot push new anecdote. Okay, so yeah, for every heading, and we'll start with heading. I think we'll just do heading for now because that one is like literally the name, right? New anecdotes is right here. Do a little debugger right there. So now anecdote headings 0. I can say dot text content. Yeah. So I think we just go heading dot text content will give us the name. Why would it think that heading is a string? So it's an HTML heading element. Array. Yep, that's why. Thanks, TypeScript. Helps me keep my in and my of straight. Name string or null. Cool. That will keep the type nice and happy. So now I do have those employer names. Foobarred. The time chandler found a foobar. Foobar is just like a thing developers say when they have like nothing else. And here we can see that the objects are getting properly created. let me debug state real quick to make sure, okay, we're actually setting state. So parse anecdote by headings is getting over here. Okay, I want to set state, set anecdotes. The time Chandler found a bar of, whoa, you see what happened? So that was technically expected, but I didn't want my cursor to move. How can I address this? Yeah, it moves my cursor. That's what I don't like here. Okay. I mean, we could store cursor position. That's getting wildly terrible. The time Chandler found a data error maliciously added by a coworker. So we don't want to do this on every key up. So how do we know? We just have an update state button. Yeah, so what I'm thinking here is we switch strategies. So instead of on every key up, we will just do this on import or export. So even though it's a bit weird, whenever the user does go to import data, we want before that update actually runs, we want to update our own state with what we currently have. That way, okay, so let's try this. So this was fun. So we're still going to need to parse, but we're not going to parse here. I'm going to still check this in. So this will be feet parse anecdote by headings. Better. It's not complete, but it's better. And add employer to anecdote type. Cool. Do I have a debugger anywhere? Nope. Don't want to check in a debugger. So this is good. Cool. So let's come back here. Everything's imported. And I want to remove this on key up, handle key up. That's the first thing. Bam. Now handle key up is no longer a handle key up. So when are we wanting to do this parse logic? We want to do this parse logic whenever we import or export. Whenever we import or export. Okay. So let's go to that import button. Grab this logic here. Okay, so here's handle import, handle change import anecdotes. This will be called update anecdote state. So we're going to update anecdote state before we actually read the file. Okay, so we get a keyboard event. It's not going to be a keyboard event anymore. Handle change import anecdotes. So this will be that import button. So we are going to want to locate the anecdote section. We can do that by ref. So we won't use this at all. Button section is over here. Anecdote card section. I don't know if I can attach a ref right here, but we're going to try to. So this is anecdotes. Anecdote section ref. Anecdote. Anecdote section ref equals. So we're going to use ref. That's another hook. Ref lets you store basically anything in memory, including a reference to an HTML element. Cool. So this will be anecdote section ref, use ref null. And then ref it like this, ref. Anecdote section ref. Property ref does not exist on this. Okay. So the ref will need to be on the actual section tag. So anecdotes ref. We'll just keep this name, go down a level, and attach it here. Okay. Ref implicitly has an any type. So we're trying to find a type for ref, step input, ref object. These are in class components. Let's see if I can use it anyway. Let's seems to work. Oop. Okay. Yeah, so this is now button section. Okay, so now we're using a ref. Update our types to include this. Okay. Previously we were using EV, but now we just want anecdote section ref. So that should be the ref. We might need to do like .current or something like that. I think we do. Cool, so here we are, key down, that's fine, import. And now, so now it's happening on import, right? So we got result, and I should be doing result.current, great. So anecdote, here's .current. And that will give us a reference to the section tag. I'll debug it now, but I think from there it's very similar. So let's import anecdotes. Yep, so we still got our 2. And let's see. If this works. So console.log. Let's log the new anecdotes. We're setting it into state, but it's not super transparent. So using the console log will be more visible to me as a human. Okay. The time Chandler found a bar of foo. Okay. Now, when I do this, I expect bar of foo to show up in my console. We always want to clarify our expectation before we execute. Okay. So Chandler found a bar of foo. So that ran first as I intended. By the way, I think this is thanks to a recent innovation in React. Previously, this was a lot harder to use multiple set state. So technically, we're setting state multiple times within a single function. So within handle import anecdotes, we run update anecdote state, and then we later reader set state. We benefit because the later function is asynchronous. So even outside of React, the JavaScript engine should queue onload to happen later. In particular, because this is an async function, it would be like using a set timeout 0. It should queue it to the end. But even if this was executed serially, let me phrase it like this. If this was executed serially a couple years ago, React would have had a big problem. It could have cycled because we're setting state multiple times within the same function. Recently, React has implemented support for that, where if you basically have it in a function like this, React will intelligently queue. So it works. I thought it was chancy to do that, but it seems to be working. Okay, so now we know that we can like goof up this stuff and then import. That didn't work. Anecdotes.json. Because in memory it is not different. Anecdotes.json. Why is my debugger not hitting? I thought I had a debugger. Okay, I guess I removed my debugger. Console.log. This should happen every time. Oh, it's on change now. And because the file we pick is not changing, it's not running. So let's do 2 different listeners. Because I don't really think, because I think I want to do that on click, not on change, so that it runs regardless. So does on click run before on change? Let's check. React does, it should logically. Okay, nothing really obvious, but we'll test it. So on click handle, we just call this update anecdote state. I think we just immediately call it A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L. So update anecdote state. In theory, I could pass the event, but I don't need it. Now, let's remove this guy from here. Okay. And let's remove the debugger. We already have a console log statement. We can debug if needed. Refresh this page. Goof this up. Okay. Ooh. And it updated state like that. Yep. And now that is imported. Boom. So that diff is not working. It should. Yeah. Okay. Let me cancel and read this. Whoa. Read as text file. Ah, so canceling presents an issue. That's fun. Parameter 1 is not of type blob. So I think the length would have been 0. So files.length. Object is possibly null. Yep. Okay. So anecdote cancel. Now we survive that. Okay, great. This is happening. Cancel, survived, check my new anecdotes. Okay, so that is working. Bam, that is overwritten. Bam. It should overwrite it again. It should overwrite it again. Why is that second override is not working? Yeah, it's like the queue is failing now, is how it seems. So it's so there seems to be a race condition. So we're not assured that click runs first. We are not assured that click runs first. Okay. So I think this can go in both places. It's a little bit redundant and extraneous, but if it fixes the issue, worth it. Handle, change, import anecdotes. We can even await it if we need to. I don't think we need to, but we could. Okay. So here we goof this up. Import. That's expected. Bam. That's expected. Let's do this. That's expected. That's unexpected. It should rewrite it again. Okay, so state is not updating. Expected. Let's go to the main state Anecdotes is the state we're referring to, by the way. We use state there. That's what we mean. Okay. Refresh this guy. Bam, bam, good. Foobar. Now we updated state. Anecdotes is looking good. Play. And I will pick Anecdotes. Now Anecdotes is still kind of ugly like this. So I expect onChange to have changed my state. So the actual onChange doesn't seem to change my state. Handle change import Anecdotes. Okay, that time state did get updated. So it did, just had some stuff in the queue. Okay. This will be round 2. Boom, it should say round 2. Yep. Okay, that's fine, that's fine. No, it should have tried to actually import. Okay. So change detection did not even trigger that time, because the file that we picked was no different. Because the file that we picked was no different. I almost want to use an event that's not on change. React on file upload. I think we typically use on change. So here's on file upload. So this is saying on click, and then it's using an on change behind the scenes. Nope, I don't like that. Okay, so let's double check any chat messages. I think we're looking fine. So what can we do about this issue? So the issue is that if you did not pick a different file, then it does not change your state. I think that's actually fine. I think the only reason this is jarring is because I want it to wipe my stuff out. Yeah, I want it to wipe my stuff out. So is there a way that I can tell the file reader, hey, you don't remember? Like, just force it to not remember. Force file reader to forget at last upload. So we have the file reader. This is a new file reader. Ah, okay. We can just use the destructured parsed. So that will create a new reference and should trigger change detection. So here is first. Everything's looking good. Anecdotes, good. Yep, and here is second. Bring it up, bring it up, bring it up. It still didn't trigger, even though we destructured it. Huh. Did the onload trigger? I feel like React is being really smart if it knows that that value didn't change and it goes off that. Okay, so that's all as expected, and now let's go second. So we actually did not get here. So it's like the browser itself is not triggering an onload. So let's look at the file reader API and see if there's like an file reader destroy. No. So this is JavaScript file reader after load. So there's onload. Okay. Yeah, we're definitely getting in the weeds at this point. So the load is not triggering, and maybe that's just okay. If you reload this seems to be a browser constraint, not a React thing. This will not trigger if you reload the same file twice in a row. This seems to be a browser constraint, not a React thing. Okay, so I'll just put a note there and leave it at that. So, and we can confirm that this is not an issue if I do two different files, which I'm pretty sure that's correct. We got rid of debugger. Anecdotes.json. Here we will copy and paste. This will be called other anecdotes.json. Here we will just have one from 2002. The time Phoebe almost Chandlered a different Chandler. Cool. So we have these. Let's go first, import JSON, anecdotes. It works. And then we go second, import JSON. Oh no, change detection was not triggered. What about other anecdotes? We're good. Now we go back to the first one. We're good. Now we go back to the other one. We're good. Yeah. So the state change detection is working. There's like a browser. The actual file input is not detecting a change. And it's kind of right because we picked the same thing twice in a row. But as long as we're switching, then we're good. So I'm happy with this. I mean, I think it's going to work smoother when we use real form hooks in Rockstarboi, but like this works well enough. So let me double check my changes here. We added the ref, moved it over there. Okay, this is working. I think we don't need this console log. The anecdote card section, I think you don't need set anecdotes anymore. Okay. Come down here, and it doesn't need to. In the anecdote card section, we don't need to set anecdotes anymore. Parsed, we don't need that. I don't think we need to destructure parsed. We'll test that. But I think that's correct. So these changes are looking good. Check in just other anecdotes, another sample data. Okay. There seems to be an error here. You're mad about the type, right? Because I'm using the same type, even though now they are divergent type. So this will be anecdote card section props. So we need a new type because the types have diverged now. And the difference is that this guy doesn't have set anecdotes. So we'll switch back to our old name, which is button section props. Okay. Button section has button section props. And anecdote card section has anecdote card section props. Looks good to me. Waiting for type check results, it says. Usually it doesn't take that long. Okay, so I think we're ready to commit, even though the, let me kill the process. Terminate batch job, yes. Oh, this is like my actual Windows command line is laggy. Okay. So we'll go ahead and commit this, and then by the time that's done, hopefully it'll be good to go. So the feature here is we changed the change detection strategy to be update anecdote state on import click. Push that up. I think we're going to trash this console. It was like really slow. Let's get a new terminal. Starboi. Cool, so now we can import. I'll move these over. I'm not really messing with these right now. We can add anecdote. Works, we can import, and now we just need to be able to export. When we export, we also want to update the anecdote state at the beginning of the export click. But we don't need to deal with a file reader API. It's going to be more straightforward. So we update anecdote state, and then we download anecdote JSON. Okay, so we need to make this new method, and we will be good. So if I'm like a newbie, I'll just say React download .json file. Yep, and this is basically the new blob thing is correct. And here's an answer. I had a blob containing data, yeah. So this is what we need to do. Download file. I'm literally just going to rip this and then refactor it for my own purposes. ABCD. So I can put this up here. I'm calling this download anecdote JSON. Okay, so we're not using state. What we are using is we're going to get that anecdote section ref. Okay. Yeah, we really don't need to update state. We just need to get these new anecdotes. So I'll also return new anecdotes here. So the import scenario is not going to care about the return, but the export scenario will use it. And so currently we have these methods as siblings, but now we'll just make the download is the wrapper, and it will get data right here. So it's going to get the data from that. File name is file json.stringify, my data. Okay, application JSON, create this file name. Okay, we'll come up with some file name, and then it will trigger. This is how we do it. Basically, it triggers like a temporary download link and clicks it, and then it removes the temporary download link. I'll put a line break in there for readability. Okay, append child, click it, remove child. Here's the href. Okay, and then the file name. So what do we want to call this guy? I would like to call this Anecdotes dash. And then I don't know if I need to include the .json. We'll test that. And then I'm going to make it uniquely identified by putting a date here. And it's going to include a timestamp, basically. It's going to include the milliseconds of the day. That way, if they click it over and over, it'll keep being a new one. So that's get date. I want to get UTC date. Nope. What do I want to get? I want the full timestamp. Get time, maybe. Yep, that's what I'm looking for. So if I run this over and over, I keep getting new values, right? And so I don't have to worry about overwriting files. Cool. That should do it. Donkey. That was a lot simpler, wasn't it? I don't think I even need the event data. In fact, I'm tempted to like get rid of this method altogether and just plug that guy in there. But we want to respect the convention, the handle click naming convention. All right, let's test this. Anecdote JSON, here we go. So it did download properly, and it should have these like goofy empty stuff. And I'm going to bring this on screen. Yeah, that worked. Okay. So this is what I expect. I mean, it's not like well formatted or anything, but you know, maybe we have a JSON pretty fire and like another thing, but I don't think it's necessary. So this is what I expect. It's exactly what you see on screen. It's exactly what you see on screen here. Now we know that what you see on screen is not what was there a moment ago. And that's just because we haven't quite completed the parse function. But the download JSON feature works. So we're going to say feat, make sure I got no debugger. Do I have any console statements? None of those. Great. So this is pretty clean. Before I push it, I'll just double check. Basically, I just made this download function. Yeah, and it really nicely was able to reuse that update anecdote state. Cool. We're really near the end. We're going to split out the Rockstarboy initialization into another episode, but we're really near the end of feature complete for Starboi, the little lad. And you can see we're doing this kind of gross DOM parsing. I guess it's not, oh yeah, well, we haven't actually done it. I was going to say, I guess it's not that gross, but it's not done. Still, I mean, if these are like one to 3 lines each, the forms would be nice, but it's still not that bad. So what I was saying is that this is a little bit gross, but it's going to be using the nice clean form hooks in the Rockstarboi. So you'll be able to compare and contrast in 1 or 2 episodes. I don't know if I'll get to that next episode or the one after. Okay. So date. We need to traverse from this heading element to the date element. Really, the easiest way to do this is going to be to traverse to the parent anecdote card and then go down by ID, which is hilarious because in a form, I can even use the name attribute because in a form, you would just use the name attribute. So let's do that. So then we'll be able to possibly, I don't know, reuse some of this stuff when we actually get to forms. So we're going to do heading get ancestor or like get parent. We're going to have to actually get into the browser for this. Okay, document.find or get element by ID. Let's do get element by class name. Anecdote card. Get element by I know you have some other options. Get element by class name. Okay. Oh, class name instead of class. Okay, that's why it didn't work. Okay, so get element by class name. We'll get the first one. So now we got this card, right? And then we're going to get get elements by tag name, and we're going to go h3, right? So we got that DOM right there. So we're recreating the scenario that we will run into at parsing time. Parse anecdotes by headings. I'm going to get one of these heading nodes, such as this h3. So the question is, how do I go from here and then parse out the whole card? So this is like old school JavaScript, how we would have to do this a lot. So I want to get the parent. Okay, so that was the collection. Here's the node itself. And now I want to get parent or get ancestor. What does get root node do? It gets the document, yeah. So JavaScript, we're going to have to do this JavaScript get parent. Okay, it's just parent element. Okay, so we're not using the get keyword there. So this parent element, is that a method or it's just a property? Okay, so we got the h3 parent element is the anecdote card. We're going to reuse this, so we can even call it const L card, L for element, and we're going to do heading.parent element. Okay. And so here, basically, we can traverse down from this top level, traverse down to everything we care about. And we will just give all these things names. So the H3 doesn't need a name. It's just that heading, and we already have a reference to it. So this name will be Anecdote date, and it's going to get mad that I have a name. Yeah, so name is supposed to be on form elements. So we'll use IDs. Those are unique. We want unique identifiers. We don't want to use a class in this scenario. And so even if you're a junior, hopefully you can tell what I'm doing right now. We're just going to get these elements by ID. That's it. That's the whole game. So we got date, employer, situation. By the way, if what I'm doing right now at this point is confusing, check out Free Code Camp or Codecademy, and check out their web developer stuff. Free Code Camp is free. Codecademy has some free stuff. With Codecademy, I recommend, if you actually want to be a developer, that you do the pro. But for this piece, this basic HTML, you're going to be able to get that for free. Okay. So lcard.get element by ID, and the ID here would be anecdote date. Okay. lcard is possibly null. It should never be null. We'll just do a quick one of these, console.log error message, unexpected null card. And then we will just bail out of the whole method. Does not exist on HTML element. I really thought it did. Let's investigate this type concern briefly. What? That doesn't sound good. Does not exist on type HTML element. It really does, though. I'm really confused right now. Okay. So here, okay, it has some compile issue. Let's comment that out quickly. Okay. So this is compiling, and let's remember, just up arrow to remember our last inquiry. So here we have an HTML element, and it's saying get element. Oh, look, class name, tag name. So we're going to have to go to the whole document, I guess. Get element by ID. Yeah, wow. So that's fine. We'll use the actual document. Okay, so this is not good because we're ambiguating IDs across indices. So it's really only unique within the card. Parse anecdotes by headings. Okay. So we need to make sure that our IDs are truly unique. Or we could go for classes. Okay, get elements by class name. Okay, we'll go for that. TypeScript will make you think. That's great. So technically, I can't do this. I can't have anecdote date ID on every card because then it's not a unique ID. So I either need to have one anecdote date ID through the whole document, which is not tenable. I could have anecdote date card UUID. Like I had to generate those unique keys. I could do that. Or I can just do use a class instead of an ID. Get elements by class name. And then we're going to take the 0. I want to make sure that that doesn't error. So we're going to get elements by class name of foobar. There should be 0 results. And does this error on me? I just get undefined, which is OK. So if this is undefined, we're going to OR empty string for type safety. OK. Great. So let's use this guy. Cool. New anecdote. OK. We're going to OR, and if the element does exist, we'll get that text content, or if it doesn't exist, we'll do an empty string. Cool. And now our type is happy. So anecdote date. So we went in here and made these made these IDs, and now we're going to change them all to class name. Employer, situation, obstacle, and now we're going to update these class names. Employer, situation, obstacle, task, action, result, notes. DES. And you see I'm doing this all by hand. So there's like a lot of opportunity to introduce error, where like the hooks library would do a lot of this for you behind the scenes. Not all of it, but a lot of it. OK, so now, just double checking I named everything correctly. Sotar notes. Yep. So now, when I export, I should get what's here. It shouldn't do that thing where it wipes it out. Oh, something changed. It pre-pended. Yeah, that's awesome. So it's getting the text content of like the paragraph node, which contains some stuff that I manually pre-pended. So if you look in this, yeah. So one way to solve this is we're actually going to convert we're going to put these little spans. Another way is I could use like a regular expression that ignores like those, let's say it could like break it colon space. That's a little risky because what if I really wanted colon space in my text? So that's why I'm going to prefer this approach. OK. So H3 is good to go. This is good to go because I didn't prefix anything. This one I also need to change. Now, by wrapping the span here, if the user had put nothing, then I'm going to end up with NA, but I'm okay with that from a business requirement perspective. Okay. Okay, cool. So now I have all these span close tags, and I'm missing a bunch of span open tags, so that's why it's yelling at me. Let's go put those in. Okay. Cool. Let me fix these names. How does this look? Let's give it the old test. Boom. So state was refreshed, but none of the text on the screen changed. That's exactly what I want to see. Let's show this in folder. I'm going to open this guy with Notepad++ that I kind of have on the side over here outside of VS Code. And we can see it doesn't have that empty stuff. Okay, so that's great. So import anecdote JSON, other anecdote. And I should be able to keep doing these back and forth. Bam, 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 and it always refreshes. We know that if I import the same one, it doesn't really refresh. That's okay. Then I come over here, blah, 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 blah. Bam, export it. Show in folder. Edit with Notepad. See, the situation value is this goofy thing I just put there. And so I think we're done here. Thanks for joining me. I'm going to commit this guy. Bunch of change. It's like voluminous, but it's really not complicated. This is basic JavaScript parsing in HTML, not even any React logic in here. And so this is going to be, whoa, not caps, feet. And here we finalize this parsing method. Commit and push. So thanks for joining me. So that's it, and we are feature complete on Starboi. Visit the GitHub repo. Let's bring up the GitHub repo. Refresh. 16 seconds ago we finalized it. Great. Feel free to come over here on the Issues tab and leave an issue if you would like. But remember, Starboi is for personal use by a single individual. And if we want to do something that's like a community app, that's going to be Rockstarboi. We're going to try that out next time. And that's going to involve features like Redux, Prisma, Next Auth, Versal. We're going to use the React hook form instead of the content editable with the manual DOM manipulation. We're going to have Prettier, which is going to make our code a little bit cleaner. And Material, which might make our buttons look better and more consistent. So yeah, hope you'll check that out. Thanks for watching.